David, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. There are some classic games on ESPNU this week, but none of
Oh,
them are going to be Kansas, Missouri.
what? Oh, Chad, have you sent the email out that says when we're starting tonight?
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm inviting either one of you, though. But good evening, everybody, or good morning, depending on when you're watching this. Welcome back to the Hoops HD Report. I'm your
After
host,
10
Chad,
seconds, no one's watching. Don't worry. Like, everyone has turned it off already.
joined by John Titel, David Griggs, John Stalika. We have a lot to get to, a lot of exciting action that happened over the weekend. Very big game in the SEC that we're going to hit on, and a pretty big week ahead. I think this is called rivalry week, or at least I think they used to call this week that. At least I don't know if it is.
Yeah.
Are they promoting it that way?
Well, we used to have, back in the golden age of college basketball, we had rivalry season. At least it was every conference game pretty much. Now we can't even fill out an entire week's worth of rivalries, but whenever Duke plays North Carolina for the first time of the year, it's deemed rivalry week, and every game that's played that week automatically becomes a rivalry, even if it isn't.
Yeah, and what we want to do, though, is we are actually, as we record this, we are just 2 weeks away from the start of conference tournaments, about 4 weeks away from the field after being announced, and we want to start off again, like we've done the last few weeks, a little bit of a blind resume test. A couple teams I want to throw up here, and if I do this right, they should be coming up on the screen in about 2 or 3 minutes, the way this computer is running. But there they are. It's a little blind resume test with a couple of teams with very similar profiles. And David, let me start with you. I want to get your thoughts on just looking at these teams. You can see their home and the road losses and what quadrant those wins and losses are in. And what do you think of these two teams, and which one do you think is better, if either?
Well, the one on the left jumps out at me just because of the 2 quad 1 road wins and then the 3 quad 2 road wins. I mean, that's 5 wins in true road games, assuming plus a neutral game, and only 2 losses.
Oh, there's 3 losses there.
There's 3.
There's a quad 1, quad 2, and a quad 3 loss.
Oh, okay. So they kind of. I mean, that's almost going for the cycle there.
Right.
But
there's also
the one on the left, without seeing the names, jumps out 22-3. Who is that?
Okay, yeah, and I think with a little bit of math, we could easily figure these two teams out probably. But Titel, do you think these are both quality profiles that are similar? Or do you think that there is any huge gap between these two?
Oh, I know who the one on the left is.
Very similar. Obviously, more tier 2, more non-tier 1 losses on the left. They both have a couple opportunities to get better in the weeks ahead, although obviously
I know who the one on the right is too.
Upcoming game against 45th in the net ranking. Non-conference strength of schedule is pretty similar. Many more games against the board on the right. I think they seem pretty close based on the visuals.
All right, well, let's go ahead and reveal.
It's the one on the right that's better. I said that during the write-up today. I figured.
And David, I want to put up. We seem to have frozen a little bit here. I'll give you a second to get this back up again.
I think without giving away too many spoilers, I can say one team is going to be mentioned in the report tonight, and one team we are still going to be mentioning on Wednesday based on their ranking in the polls.
You're about to see it anyway.
Yes, it is. The team on the left there was Buffalo. We had a little minor glitch in the system there. It's back up again. The team on the right is Wofford. Buffalo's a team that has been ranked all season. Titel, let me ask you about this. They've been ranked all season, but we look at this. Aren't they pretty darn close when you look at these two profiles?
Close, yes, but I think that the reason the blindness helps for this one is a couple things. Number one, the 14-game winning streak is fantastic, and if it keeps going up to 20, it's going to be a team that might be a protected seed, God forbid. The fact that you have these tier 2 and tier 3 losses for Buffalo, kudos to Wofford for not losing to any bad teams. It's a strong resume when you put it on paper like this. I think it's a good comparison.
And I just want to point out, for those of you that have been watching the show every week here, there's something a little bit different on these team sheets. You can see, especially there in the tier 2, for example, there's a bit of a line somewhere in the middle of those games. The NCAA this year on their official team sheets is separating out what they call a 1A and a 1B and a 2A and a 2B. Essentially, a 1A win is 1 through 15 at home, 1 through 25 neutral, 1 through 40 road, whereas a 1B win would be 16 to 30, 26 to 50, 41 to 75. So, you have a really good one and kind of mediocre ones, the same on the tier 2.
Yeah.
So we're now actually differentiating those on these team sheets that we're looking at as well.
Chad, can I make a point?
Yeah.
The blind resumes are interesting because it kind of gets you to look at it a certain way, but you can't evaluate a resume blindly. Like, you have to reveal it and see what it is. One of the things on Buffalo's resume, that win at West Virginia, not looking very good now, but you have to consider, while West Virginia wasn't quite as bad and quite as understaffed when Buffalo beat them as they are now, you kind of have to know when that game was played and under the circumstances it was played. I'm not really sure what to make about the win at Syracuse because they've been schizophrenic all year. But the other thing about Wofford, like, they haven't beaten a team as good as Syracuse, but the 2 wins, East Tennessee State, UNC Greensboro, those teams are combined 20-3 at home. 2 of the 3 losses are to Wofford. That's pretty good. And the other thing is, Wofford hasn't lost a conference game. The SoCon, at least as good as the MAC, I think, and maybe even better. This is a good Wofford team, even though you tricked me into picking Buffalo.
Just real quick, Buffalo, who is a top 25 team, to just mention them real quickly here, they've got a fairly easy week ahead this week with Ohio and Kent State at home. So I do expect them to keep winning, maybe really only one even minor test left in the season. That's the home game against Bowling Green to end the regular season before the MAC tournament. Wofford on the right there, a huge game this week at Furman.
I would also watch out for that game at Miami, though, because the Red Hawks were actually the first team that beat Bowling Green in the MAC this year. So I wouldn't completely overlook that if I were the Bulls. But depending on how the Red Hawks do, there's a possibility winning at Mother Miami could be Tier 2B, the way the schedule is laid out now.
Right. Well, let's jump on over to the rest of the major teams that we discussed this, and let's go right into the SEC, where we saw what was supposed to be the game of the season, to Tennessee at Kentucky on Saturday. And David, it was a complete demolishing, especially the second half.
It was. Tennessee stayed with them for the first half, and it was within reach. And I remember thinking going into the half that, well, I bet Tennessee makes some adjustments, comes out and gets it done. I almost tweeted that. I'm so glad that I didn't. I don't know why I'm admitting it now, but it was just I was more impressed with Kentucky than I was disappointed in Tennessee. I don't think that Tennessee played up to their ceiling. I think it's one of those cases to where you're never as bad as your worst game, and you're probably not as good as your best game. This was not in the top half of games that Tennessee has played as far as how well they've played. And again, that's not to take anything away from Kentucky, who was coming off of a loss and didn't really have a lot of momentum and just absolutely power drive them, played better than they did. But that's not – I mean, they got to play again, and this time it's going to be in Tennessee. And is Tennessee going to come out swinging harder and make adjustments and, for the second time that they play?
Well, and it's you mentioned that Kentucky was coming off that very controversial loss on Tuesday night at home to LSU. But Stalika, this LSU team – now is the first team that's tied for first place with the win at Kentucky, and they squeaked out a game at Georgia that was, maybe a little bit of a letdown after the excitement of that win at Kentucky.
It could have been potentially disastrous, but LSU is cementing themselves as more and more of a protected seed type team, and they'll also have opportunities against Tennessee, and I think 2 games against Florida where the Tigers could also continue to enhance their profile. But speaking of Florida, I think this is another team that is actually getting back into the discussion thanks to their win over Vanderbilt, and most notably a win at Alabama where the Gators were in command from start to finish in that one.
Yeah, very nice win at Alabama. But I guess the other team, Titel.
Is the bubble so bad that we're calling wins at Vanderbilt nice? I mean, look at all that's 12 very nice wins for the conference over Vandy right now.
Titel, when you go beyond the top 3 teams, sitting there still inexplicably tied with South Carolina, but how about Ole Miss?
They've been amazing. They started 14-3, and I think a lot of people started to jump on the bandwagon, and then everybody ran away when they lost 4 in a row. But they bounced back to win 4 in a row. They won at Auburn, which I understand that Auburn is not a top 4 material team, but still decent and still might make the tournament. They're favored to win their next 2 at South Carolina, and then they host Georgia. Their final 2 home games are brutal. Host Tennessee, host Kentucky. Good luck. They're getting it done at the free throw line because they can win close games, over 77%, number 9 in the nation. All 7 of their losses are to top 75 teams, so it's not like they have anything bad on their resume. They're doing it with a very small lineup, 4 starters who are 6'7" or less. And I hate the Tyree family after the helmet catch, but Brian Tyree deserves some credit. He's been killing it from behind the arc. His last 5 games, 17 of 34 from three-point land.
Wow. That is.
And David, when you look at the SEC, especially below Mississippi State, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, maybe even Arkansas, you got a lot of bubble here. Although I think we're going to have to put most of these teams in because we got to get to 68. And is that a problem with the bubble this year?
Well, most of us feel that way. You posted a bracket today that only had 64 in it, but
thank you.
Yeah, you got to take 68, and it kind of creates a unique. Well, I don't want to say unique, but the situation, if you're a biggie or if you're a bubble team in this conference, is entirely different from being a bubble team in, say, the Pac-12 or the American, because you have the chance to play and distance yourself from other bubble teams, and then get a shot at the moon by taking on one of the heavyweights in LSU, Kentucky, or Tennessee. So even as bad as all these teams have been, the opportunity for 1, 2, maybe 3, probably not 3, but 2 of them are probably going to look a lot better at the end of the year than what they do now, just by virtue of the opportunities they have. And, you know, if you get 5 opportunities and cash in on 1 or 2 of them, then you're probably going to end up better than what opportunities that UCF and Temple have the rest of the way. We'll get to the American later.
And just quickly take a look at the schedule for this week in the SEC. Stalika, huge week for LSU hosting Florida and Tennessee.
Yeah, that was one of the games for Florida we had teased earlier, along with the Tennessee game they'll be getting at home. But also watch Mississippi State, because Nick Weatherspoon was actually suspended beginning with that game at Arkansas. But Mississippi State actually won that without too much trouble. They go to Georgia this week, and they'll also host a dangerous South Carolina team that they should still be able to beat, but have already lost to the Gamecocks once this year.
And I just want to quickly mention there's a game Saturday, Auburn at Kentucky. Should Auburn win this game, which I don't think they can, that would change their profile immensely.
Immensely. Real quick question. Coach of the year in this conference, will Wade, Calipari, or Barnes? My vote is Baton Rouge, by the way. I think he's just done – all 3 of those guys have done a sensational job, but he's done exceptionally well.
So you're not going Tom Crean?
No.
You're not going with Angry Frank either?
There is an argument for well, Titel, you do your awards. What do you think?
As of today, Will Wade will be your SEC Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
I agree completely. Let's jump over to the ACC, where before we started the show here tonight, we just saw Virginia go to Virginia Tech.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in this conference.
Well, Virginia went and beat down Virginia Tech, but there is a lot to discuss, and I'm not even that certain where to begin, but I guess, David, do you want to start at the tap with the new number 1 team in the nation, the Duke Blue Devils?
Yeah, what a week they had. It seems
Louisville?
like it was a month ago, but it was less than a week ago where they were down 23 at Louisville, and nobody thought they were number 1 then. It was I could not believe this. I never would have believed it, but David Warlock would not get this wrong. No team in the history of Division I college basketball has blown a 23-point lead with 10 minutes to go. I just cannot believe that of all the millions of games that have been played, that it hasn't happened once. But the biggest deficit ever, I think, is 31. But This was the biggest deficit ever with less than 10 minutes to go. It was rather historic and rather amazing if you watched it. It was like watching the Titanic sink.
That's the kicker, David, because you mentioned the 31-point game where Kentucky came back at LSU. That was with about, I think, 15 or 16 minutes left. This was a shorter time frame where Louisville just melted down.
Right. Louisville almost sent it into overtime. You got the sense, had it gone into overtime, Duke may have won by 20.
And then Louisville almost had a meltdown on Saturday against Clemson and somehow found a way.
They did.
Okay.
That it was against Clemson, and the two kind of offset each other here.
And a bad week for Clemson, a pair of 1-point losses to Miami and to Louisville or 2 point. Yeah, it was 1 point to Louisville also, and from a team that was right there on the bubble and may now be on the bad side of the bubble.
Right. If you could not have scripted the last minute of that Louisville-Clemson game better, considering the two teams that were in it. Louisville had a 7-point lead. Clemson came all the way back, cut it to 1. On an inbounds pass with seconds to go, Louisville turns it over, and Clemson misses what would have been a game-winning shot that they had a wide-open look. It was unbelievable.
I want to turn to another team here, though, Title. Probably, maybe, I argue this may be the hottest team in the ACC, at least in terms of winning streak. What about the Noles?
It's been a roller coaster. It started 12-1, arguably one of the hottest teams in the nation, then got into ACC play and dropped 4 out of 5. They lost at Pitt and at BC, for God's sake. Then they bounced back. They won 7 in a row. They beat Syracuse. They beat Louisville. And it's not just starting lineup. Fiondu Cabagnale off the bench has been amazing. He used to only be known as Dikembe Mutombo's nephew. He's becoming the ACC Sixth Man of the Year. He had 24 and 10 against Duke. He had 22 points against Louisville. You have to remember, last March, this team was 5 points away from making the Final Four. He brought back 7 of their top 9 scorers for that game, so a very veteran crew. And I don't know if Leonard Hamilton can get it done because the Final Four has eluded him his entire life, but they've got some talent on this team.
Well, they've got a game at North Carolina that's really, really tough on the remaining schedule. Other than that, every game looks pretty winnable. Maybe even especially at Clemson, the way the Tigers are playing. But
they'll win that one. Either Clemson will miss a last-second shot, or Florida State will hit one.
Well, I guess here's my question: is this Florida State team on track for a top 4 seed now?
Certainly trending up, and if they lose to Carolina and win the other 5, that'll put them at 25-6 entering the ACC tourney. If they can beat a couple teams, then lose to Duke or Virginia in the semis or finals, I could see them as a 4 or 5 seed. I'm trying to see what did I have them at this week. I think I had them as a 6, but yeah, they're heading in the right direction, obviously.
But of course, it wouldn't surprise me if Florida State won those first 5 and somehow ended up losing at Wake Forest to make their schizophrenic profile look complete.
Yeah, if you want to talk about schizophrenic profiles, both Syracuse and NC State in this conference, I can pull those up quickly here. These are two teams. What do you do with teams like this?
Right, and these teams, well, Syracuse in particular, is really hard to place. I'm not. It depends on what the question is. I think the actual committee, and judging by Titel's guessing of them, he agrees, is going to like NC State a lot more than I do. To me, this one's easy. You haven't beaten anyone away from home that's in the field other than you haven't beaten anyone away from home that's in the field.
Right.
And the teams that you have beaten at home that are likely to make it are awful road teams. I would have them close to out. But Syracuse at least has done something. Winning at Duke, winning at Ohio State. Notre Dame, not the easiest place to win. I mean, I think it's a lot easier.
Time out, David.
Yes.
Don't give Syracuse credit for Notre Dame and then take it away from NC State, who also won at Notre Dame.
Yeah. But
that's all I got to say. I mean, you just beat up NC State for lack of.
I was just reading off the road wins. I was going down. Okay, Duke and Ohio State. Then
I'll give you credit. I'll give you that. But I don't want to hear you say how difficult it was. How Syracuse has a good win at Notre Dame, and then NC State has no good road wins. That's
Notre Dame is not a good road win. I will retract that statement.
All right, I'll give you that. Let's take a look at the upcoming schedule here in the ACC, and we got to start with the game of the season, obviously, as it is every year, as it is twice every year. No, it's not Wake Notre Dame. It's Wednesday night, North Carolina at Duke, and I actually have some stats I pulled up here. Let me go ahead and pull it up here. I actually did a little bit of some fascinating facts here. I did some measurements right there on the left, MapQuest. These two schools are only 8 miles apart. Did you know that? And there's the map from Durham up top there down to Chapel Hill.
Oh, okay. So that's Durham, right there. Could you circle Durham? I just want to make sure I got this.
Is there tobacco located along the road? I wasn't sure.
Okay. Yeah.
I just moved it. But Durham is right here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right there, that little
there it is. I see it. It's right there. Yeah.
That is Cameron right there. This is the Dean Dome right there.
And it's 8 miles.
8 miles. A little bit of traffic here.
Wow.
So the yellow. So.
Yeah. A little. Got stoplights right there.
But I got something a little bit more here. If you look over here, I did a little research. It should be coming up on the screen any second. Right there. The complete NCAA tournament. We checked every single year. Guess what?
They've never met.
every year. Look at there. 1956 did not happen.
Yeah.
2001 did not happen.
Right, 1968. What about 1968? No, it didn't.
1991 was actually the closest they would have come to meeting.
Yeah, but they didn't.
This is incredible. That 8 miles apart, and they have never met in the NCAA tournament. So
right. Wow. That's some good stuff there. And the counter is I'm placing the over-under at 47. The number of times you will hear that between now and the end of that game.
A few other interesting games this week, though. Title, including Duke at Syracuse, Virginia at Louisville, Florida State at North Carolina. Big weekend, actually, in the ACC.
Big week for Louisville at Syracuse and host Virginia. That's going to be, especially for a team that is like clinging to life with all these buzzer beaters and these horrible choke jobs.
I guess you mentioned the word buzzer beater, and I think that is the basis to move over to the Big Ten, although it killed me what Iowa did. And Title, let me just go ahead and start with you because it broke my heart, but you can have at it.
I'm happy to re-break your heart. That's fine. So this Iowa team finished January with losses to the Spartans and Minnesota, which are both respectable. They've been red hot they've been blue hot in February, 4-0. They had the huge win over Michigan by 15. The last two have been this close, a pair of buzzer beaters. Jordan Bohannon to beat Northwestern by 1. And, of course, Joe Wieskamp somehow off the upper corner quadrant of the glass for the 2-point win at Rutgers. The future is bright for this team. I thought they were a year away because they only have one senior among their top 12 scorers. But thanks to Rutgers, apparently the future's now.
And at the top of the conference, though, Stalika.
Can I just say that was a garbage shot? It went in, but we all agree that was so far off the mark that it hit the backboard.
So it shouldn't count.
Yeah,
I like that. All right, but Stalika, at the top of the conference here, a little news for Michigan State. Nick Ward out and maybe indefinitely now. Second leading scorer. Are the Sparties in a little trouble?
Well, I think he was in and out of the lineup Sunday where they were struggling with Ohio State.
Yeah, he broke his hand in the game, and that's why he's out. Yeah,
that was the first 36 minutes of that game, and they ended up finishing that game on a 20-2 run. But at the same time, I don't think the Spartans have faced Michigan yet, so it's certainly not going to help playing them shorthanded.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what's left to Title. What do you have left in this team with, Langford already gone for the season? Now if Ward is out and if he's out, especially for the season, you only got one double-digit scorer left on the team.
You need Cassius Winston to turn into John Morant with these 40-point 10 assist games because I don't know if there's going to be 10 assists out there with the team he's got left, but he's capable of scoring 40. He's an amazing point guard.
He is, but the question is that could be enough, especially the way Michigan is playing, David. They went ahead and took care of Maryland over the weekend after whatever happened at Penn State.
Yeah, whatever happened to Penn State. John Beilein picking up, I think, just the second and third technicals of his career. He got them about 15 seconds away from each other, getting tossed at the half, and that happens. Sometimes your team is just playing so badly that you got to let the referees have it. And but anyway, a little bit of it was a bit of an anomaly. I think they're the only team in the top 40 that's lost a game to someone with a losing record, and they're the only team certainly in the hunt for a protected seed that's lost a game to somebody that doesn't have a winning record at home. So it was a pretty big upset, but you have to kind of look at it as an anomaly, don't you? I mean, I don't think it changed my opinion of Michigan or made me think that their ceiling was any lower than what it was before the game. Just a bad game.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of interesting games this week. It's an interesting week for Purdue with the road trips to Iowa and Nebraska, two teams that don't look like tournament teams but are still dangerous. Also, we have that huge Michigan State-Michigan game coming up on Sunday, so we're absolutely circling that one.
So Indiana has just absolutely stunk. But I mean, again, when you're doing these brackets, we put them in our field last week just because of what they have done out at conference.
Because we had to get to 68 for some reason.
Yeah. Are they dead yet? I mean, Titel had them in the other day.
You beat Marquette and Louisville and Michigan State, especially on the road. You're in the discussion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're in the discussion.
And if they bounce back, if they beat Purdue at home this week, if they then they win at Iowa Friday night, they're right back in there. So
yeah, if they win those two,
especially with the way that the schedule plays out, every team here is still going to have their chances to get back up in there.
right?
Even Nebraska will. So hey,
Nebraska's in. Look at that net; it's 39. You don't. I mean, they've beaten top 10 teams from Louisiana. They've won more games in the state of Nebraska than anybody else.
I can't find the darn buzzer here. This is
just an amazing profile.
Let's move over to the Big East Conference. Stalika, let me start things off with you in the Big East, where now Villanova now picks up the win over Providence, bounces back and has a loss over the weekend. Marquette picks up the win over DePaul, so they are now back up half a game behind Villanova still for first place.
That game didn't start out like Villanova was going to lose. They jump out 19 points against the Johnnies early, but St. John's has actually managed to whittle away and actually got their first win at home against Villanova going back to 2002. So Villanova was 20-4 against the Johnnies in that spread.
Right, and Titel, how about these Johnnies now? The nice home win over Butler, followed up with the Villanova win.
It's a crazy little February for St. John's. We're only halfway through the month. So they have had the 30-point loss at Duke, which obviously everybody's lost to Duke this year. They were leading Marquette by 15 in the second half and somehow hung on for a road win after almost blowing the lead. Then Mustafa Heron is out with a bruised right knee, and they lose at home to Providence by double digits. Then Heron comes back and scores 28, and they still only beat Butler in overtime. And then John obviously mentioned the big win over Villanova. He talked about their first win there since 2002. Let me take you back a little farther. The last time this team won an NCAA tourney game, 2000, when they beat at Power from Northern Arizona University. Their leading scorer in that game with 20 points, a little gentleman named Marvis Linwood Thornton III. You might remember him as a Bootsy.
There's Bootsy Thornton right on the screen there.
Interesting, because they sold out Madison Square Garden for this game, and I know it was Villanova, and I'm sure that people made the trip down from Philadelphia, but and I don't know what tickets were going for, but the Johnnies, while they've had some good teams, they sold out Madison Square Garden. I don't even think the Knicks can do that.
The Johnnies much better than the Knicks. One of the team, Seton Hall, also a very good week with wins over Georgetown and at Creighton. And finally, we have
a buzz around this team. That's what I was getting at. I mean, is there more momentum behind the Johnnies than what we've seen in? I don't even remember. I mean, they sold out MSG.
And if you look now for the first time, I think all season, we have 4 teams with winning records in the Big East, including the Johnnies and Seton Hall. So congrats. Maybe this conference is taking shape, and maybe this is a solid 4-bid conference, and that's it. But at least we have not 2-bid conference anymore.
I would still say there's an outside shot that Butler can possibly sneak in for a 5th bid, but they're going to have to win at either Marquette or Villanova to do that, and they certainly can't be slipping up against any of their smaller games.
Yeah, actually, they are at Marquette coming up Wednesday night, and the Johnnies are hosting Seton Hall on Saturday. A couple of games that are definitely worth circling on the schedule here.
Can I ask the panel about Seton Hall? A little bit, not as schizophrenic as Syracuse certainly, but a little bit schizophrenic. But have they righted the ship? I think they've won 4 out of their last 5 after nosediving. And you look at the wins against Kentucky and at Maryland, and the top of that profile is really, really good.
I'll tell you, personally, I think that's exactly what you look at. That top of that profile being so good, the quantity of wins are up there. The winning conference record is there now with this 3-game winning streak. I think they're a solid pick. But Titel, you're the expert. Are they a solid team at this point?
I don't know that anybody outside the top 2 in the Big East is solid at this point. My response, when's the last time DePaul swept anyone who was solid? Come on.
Okay.
Well, true. I mean, they're just all over the place. I mean, DePaul, and let's not forget St. Louis at home.
Last time DePaul swept anyone of note, they were in Conference USA.
And, that lost in Nebraska, but Nebraska is solidly in the field. You can't.
I thought they were an independent last time they swept anybody of note, but let's go over to the Big 12 conference. where as we record this, actually, we've got a couple Big 12 games going on. Kansas State and I think TCU are both playing as we record this tonight. But in terms of what happened over the weekend here, maybe we got to start out, Stalika, with Kansas. I mean, have they rated the ship now? Now only one game back of first place in the loss column.
Well, I've said many times before what it's going to take for Kansas to finally lose their place as king of the Big 12 is not only do they have to slide, but someone else is going to have to slide in their place. Kansas State, they got the win at Texas, which was good, but at the same time they slipped up at home to Iowa State, so it does bring them back down to the pack a little bit. And losing at West Virginia certainly is not helping the Wildcats case right now.
It's still early in that game.
But I think if you're looking for fireworks over the weekend, it would have been during Texas Tech's blowout win over Baylor, where they went for an alley-oop dunk at the end, and Chris Beard not happy whatsoever with his team, or at least the guys responsible.
Yes, Titel, I think you want to address that Texas Tech team.
I mean, now that John stole my thunder, I don't need to address all of it. But
okay.
No, I think that – I'm kidding. Texas Tech has been another roller coaster team. 15-1 a month ago. Then they dropped 4 out of 6, but they've righted the ship with 4 straight wins by double digits in a very difficult conference, tied with the Jayhawks and the Wildcats for the most wins in the conference with 9. And everybody talks about defense in, like, Virginia. The number 1 adjusted defensive efficiency in the nation is in Lubbock, Texas.
It is, yeah.
Chris Beard, I understand he was overreacting, but John, will you agree, like, it's not classy to do an alley-oop in the final seconds when you're up by 20-plus points?
Well, it certainly didn't help that Baylor was still pressing, so in some respects they were just trying to play through.
They weren't. Yeah, you don't do an alley-oop in that situation. It was. I'm glad he came down hard at his own player, where Baylor could see that he was mad at them.
I had changed the channel long before this. This is actually the first I'm hearing of it. So, what he just? I mean, it's not. I could see him not liking that, knowing him the way that knowing about him the way that I do.
No, pull up the video. He was really upset at his players for doing that.
Yeah.
And his walk-on.
David, I want to bring up one other team here on the left here. The Oklahoma Sooners, finally won a game, and a pretty good one at TCU. Arguably one of their best wins of the season here.
I think it was their best win of the season. Is it good enough to fill a big cavernous void of not very good? I don't know that it is. They haven't really done anything else. The win at home against Wofford is certainly good. Florida isn't even solidly in our field or in it at all. I just don't. I know that, like, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Whiskey, not only are those tournament teams, those are really, really good tournament teams, but I think to lose all, like, they just won 1 or 2 more.
Well, David, here's my point with Oklahoma. And first you got to do is you got to look past that 4-9 conference record, because that is pathetically bad.
Yeah, it is.
But you look at those losses, and again, we mentioned that 1A, 1B thing here. All of those losses, with except, are pretty much in that 1A category, above that little line there. They are all, games that you don't expect teams to win, and that most teams are going to lose those games, and even teams that are tournament quality teams. And what John just circled on the screen there, that's strength of schedules. Titel, this is Oklahoma team. If you had to do the field right now, are they good enough to be in?
I believe I had them in when I did my last bracket. I think I had them at the 10 line, but precariously so. Just think about it, though, when you're talking about a team who's going to get an at-large with their best win against Wofford. But it's true.
Well, there are a lot of games left, including a trip to Iowa State and a home game against Kansas and a trip to K-State. They got to do something there, because you can't stay 5 games under 500.
Yeah,
I do agree.
Texas at home, they really need to win that one. I mean, if you're a tournament caliber team, I know Texas is tournament caliber, but they're not exactly a road warrior. They really need that one.
Stalika, let's take a look at the upcoming schedule. We mentioned 2 games going on tonight, but a lot of big games this week, including this weekend, Kansas, Texas Tech, Iowa State, TCU, Texas, Oklahoma.
Well, besides Texas Tech, I would also look at the Cyclones, who are going to be hosting Baylor, and then they'll be going to TCU, who can't seem to beat anybody else after the Horned Frogs got the win at Iowa State. because as we speak, TCU losing at Oklahoma State.
And if Kansas can go 2-0 this week, win the game at Texas Tech, beat K-State at home next Monday night, there you go. They're in great shape to at least tie for another Big 12 championship and keep that streak alive, despite us writing them off a couple weeks ago.
It's been almost 12 months since the long dry spell, the long wait is almost over. Kansas has a chance to win it all.
Kansas has a chance to be back in first place. That has been one of the longest dry spells without them not being in first place I ever.
Right, yeah.
Over in the American Conference, Title, let me start off with you with the top of this conference and this Houston team that, one of the questions is always with, is this team a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed? They continue to win, though.
They are not a 1 seed. If they win out and a couple teams above them lose, they're still probably not a 1 seed, but they are 4 points away from perfection. They lost at Temple on a last-second charge block call. They've won 10 in a row since then, each win by 7 or more points. They're not squeaking by anybody. They're putting their emphasis on beating teams. Amazing. You cannot make threes against them. 27% from behind the arc allowed, number 2 in the nation. They don't have stretch fours on the wing who are like 6'9" blocking shots. Small starting lineup, 6'1", 6'1", 6'3", 6'7", 6'8". And Coach Kelvin Sampson, say what you will about him for off-the-court behavior and recruiting and whatever, the most wins he's ever had in a season was 31 back in 2002 when he led the Sooners to the Final Four. He could finish this regular season with 30, and it's going to be due to the same 2 guys. So his backcourt back in 2002, Hollis Price and Quantis White. If those names ring a bell, it's because the current Houston coaching staff has assistant coach Quantis White and director for player development Hollis Price, and there they are.
I assure you they ring a bell to me, Titel, because I remember Thad Matta's first team losing to Oklahoma in the second round.
Yeah, that was a fantastic team. I thought that they had a chance to win it all that year. But this Houston team, they've beaten good teams. They've beaten decent teams. We haven't seen them play like Duke and Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Gonzaga, Kansas. We've seen those teams play against 1 and 2 seed caliber teams, top 10 caliber teams. I'm not saying Houston can't do it, but what do you all think? What are they going to do when they get out there, if they get that deep into the tournament against one of the real heavyweights like those? Can they hang with those guys, or are they just a really good team that
I think they can. I think that I honestly believe that this Houston team is good enough to go to the Final Four. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Wow. I don't know. I'm not saying they're not. I'm not arguing one way or the other. I know that I'm always right about everything, but in this case, I'm actually not sure.
I mean, it does depend on what region they're in. I mean, if they end up in Duke's region, I'm not going to call them a Final Four team. But if they end up in, let's say, Gonzaga's region, I may be picking them to go to the Final Four.
Yeah.
Let me also make a small clarification. That was Thad Matta's first Xavier team back in 2002. He did have a team back in 2001 with Butler that demolished Wake Forest before losing their second round game.
Right. A couple other notes
back when Wake Forest was good at basketball. I remember hearing about that.
A good week actually for Temple. Picked up a couple wins. They struggled to get the win against at South Florida, but they did pick up that victory, so they're keeping their at-large hopes alive. Same thing with UCF. But let's take a quick look at the upcoming schedule here in the American. And David, I'll pull this up the screen for you here. As we have Houston is hosting South Florida. I think they only play once this week.
Yeah, UCF at Cincinnati. That's a really big one. If UCF wants to really take a huge jump over the line and get on the right side of the bubble, winning at Cincinnati is a good way to do it. And I got to say, I know they lost the game, but Cincinnati down at Houston, I think I was more impressed with them than disappointed in them despite the loss. And I'm kind of wondering, how good is this Cincinnati team? We've been putting them around the 8-9 line, but I mean, they're 21-4 on the year. They've won a lot of games, albeit not very many against tournament caliber teams, but how good are they? I mean, could they get to the second? Oh, wait, no, Mick Cronin's coaching.
Well, they'll get to the second round, but I just don't.
The second weekend. That's what I mean.
You can forget about the second weekend. We're talking about Cincinnati.
Yeah. I mean, the Golden State Warriors could serve as ringers, and they still wouldn't get out of the round of 30.
Let's jump over to the Pac-12, where Washington remained in first place. They struggled against their rivals, Wazoo, who had been crazily one of the hottest teams in the nation, at least in the western half of the nation heading into this week. But Washington does remain in first place here at 11-1, and though they're not getting tons of quality wins, they have a lot of quantity in what is allegedly a power conference. But beyond them, Arizona State with the loss to Colorado, Stalika, and it's just kind of like, that's it. Are we down to a one-bid conference unless Washington loses in the tournament?
I think the highlight of this week actually had to be a 30-minute delay between Stanford and UCLA, where they were trying
because it's 30 minutes we didn't have to watch Pac-12 basketball.
But despite their best efforts, they were able to fix the basket and actually get the second half played. But to Chad's point, another team like Arizona State, they also had a 1-1 trip to the mountain schools where they lose to Colorado, but actually get a halfway decent win at Utah. But
they got a win at Utah. That's about all I can say.
I mean, the thing is, and we talked about this earlier about how the SEC and a lot of these teams that are sort of hovering around the bubble or below it still have a path into the field just because of the opportunities. Does anyone in this league, Oregon State, Utah, some of the probably not Utah at all, but some of the teams that have been playing better recently have a way in without the auto bid, and I don't think they do.
I think the only team that still does is Arizona State, and they really may have used up all their strikes, they can't mess up again. But Titel, what about the team that's down in second place? What about the Beavers?
Beavers are really impressive. This is a program that has won more than 20 games exactly once in the last 30 years, since 1990. After blowing the doors off the Ducks, 15-point win last Saturday. They're now 16-8 with 6 regular season games left, and as you mentioned, the second-best record in the conference. They're getting it done with an amazing starting backcourt of Stephen and Ethan Thompson, who, in my opinion, hold the title now of the best siblings named Thompson. To find anybody close, you got to go back to 1983 when Thompson twins released "Hold Me Now." The only question is, what kind of curse did these Thompson non-twins, the siblings, put on my Wildcats? We beat them by double digits last month and have gone 0-7 since then, which is our longest losing streak since, ironically, 1983, which is when the Thompson twins released "Hold Me Now."
You know what? I'm sorry, okay. Titel. You bring it up. We got pictures of the Thompson twins.
Everybody, if you close this show right now, go to google.com and look for college basketball podcast. You'll find something better. I promise. Go.
David, the upcoming schedule in the Pac-12, is there anything really worth watching?
I had a question and a thought, but it is totally out the window now. What is there going on? Aside from Oregon State, if they continue to win in the way they're playing, I think they will. What about, like we've talked about how disappointing the bubble is and how disappointing teams like Indiana and Oklahoma, at least for now, are. Why not Arizona State or Utah State? I mean, I actually, I don't think the real committee would go that way, but right now that's kind of who I like better, just based on how they're playing and the fact that at least they're winning.
Yeah, I got to say, you didn't mention, and Titel, maybe I should mention this to you, huge game Thursday night. 2 teams that cannot win a game, Cal and Arizona.
If Cal wins that game, is Sean Miller coaching on Sunday against Stanford? I don't know. Seriously.
The only thing he's got going for him right now is he's got the number 1 recruiting class in the nation coming in next year, and I think he will be the coach next year for that reason alone.
Is he hiding from the FBI? Are they just trying to disappear?
David, you mentioned Utah State. Why don't we swing over to the Mountain West Conference quickly here? And and maybe we'll start at the top of it there. But Nevada is just rolling along, just eating everybody in their path, I think.
Right, and this is a really good Nevada team, really experienced, and they're just going to be undermatched every single game. I know that they have the 1 loss at New Mexico, but I think they have more than demonstrated that that is not typical of them. If you pull them up, they're going to be favored the rest of the way. all the way through the conference tournament and maybe all the way through to the round of 32 before they're actually not favored. I guess my question with Nevada is we saw what the committee did with them. They seem to value them in Houston. A lot of the teams that have done a lot away from home, which Nevada has, but it's the same question I had about Houston. We haven't really seen them in a real heavyweight fight. What do they do? How do they perform against a Duke, a Kentucky, a Tennessee, a Virginia, a North Carolina, somebody that's way up on the top two lines?
Yeah, and it's a question we're not going to have answered until the NCAA tournament. So we have to kind of, one thing you look at is things like predictive metrics that are supposed to measure that type of thing, and they're all damn good right now.
Yeah.
But Title, is there a second Mountain West team in the Aggies that David mentioned over there on the right?
Not for making the tourney as an at-large, but certainly worthy of a few seconds of our time. This team lost to Nevada and Fresno in early January, and all they've done since then is win 9 of 10. They're only lost by 5 on the road at San Diego State. They're favored to win each of the next 3 before hosting Nevada on March 2nd. I don't think they'll beat them, but you never know. Sam Merrill, unconscious from behind the arc, 14 of 26 in his past 3. Can anyone name their coach?
It's not Stu Morrill anymore, so I forget who it is.
It is Craig Smith, who was an assistant at Nebraska and Colorado State and North Dakota State, for everyone's favorite coach, Tim Miles.
Yeah, and you have to put them in. You have to. There he is. Well, it's all up to what Tim Miles wants. If he wants Utah State in, then you have to take them.
It's totally good. I mean,
I'm telling you,
trying to save this.
Google something, you'll find something.
John S. Upcoming scheduled Nevada road trip to San Diego State, home game against Fresno. Can either of those games be dangerous for them?
Well, Fresno State is going to stand out because the Bulldogs also have a pathway, not for an at-large, but certainly for winning the Mountain West Conference tournament. But as far as the aforementioned Utah State team, they're hosting New Mexico and also go to Boise.
Right. Real quick, the West Coast Conference, the Zags are the only team seriously worth discussing in this conference at this point, and remain one of only 2, and are now one of only 2 teams left in the entire nation that are undefeated in their conference. Wofford and Gonzaga. Try to say those words quickly, but Titel, how about Gonzaga as they roll along here?
Rolling is a strong word, but it's absolutely true. 16 wins in a row since losing back-to-back to the Vols and the Tar Heels. Every single win by 13 or more points. They are stomping everybody. I don't know the last time a team won every single one of its conference games by double digits. I imagine it's pretty rare, and it's going to focus a ton of attention on the regular season finale at St. Mary's on March 2nd. We mentioned that Texas Tech is the best adjusted defensive efficiency in the nation. You want offense, you go to Spokane, 127.8, the number 1 adjusted offensive efficiency in the nation. The amazing thing, they're doing it without last year's conference tourney MVP, Killian Tilly. Amazing.
But by the same token, the Loyola
that happened. I think I know of 2 examples. One was Butler, the first year that they went to that they made the national title run. I think they won all the games by double digits. And the other one that comes to mind is Steph Curry when they were at Davidson. I think somebody almost beat them in the tournament, but during the regular season, I thought back then it was a 20-game format. I thought they won all 20 by 10 points or more.
Well, I just want to, I'll get to you 1 second. Tell quick minor correction. That San Diego game was a 12-point win, so it's 12 or more, not 13 or more. But
I guess that blew it.
So maybe they're not really as good as you said.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's bring
you. You had
I was going to say that Loyola Marymount game, that wasn't a cakewalk because for 37 minutes, that actually was, I think, within 5 or 6 points the entire way. And LMU even had a couple second-half leads before Gonzaga finally pulled away. And they had a little more comfortable time against San Diego, but that wasn't a runaway either.
But I'll say this, Delico, watching the games, and I know we were all watching them on the call, you kind of got the sense that Gonzaga was sleepwalking. So here they are sleepwalking against a team that's pretty decent on the road and still winning. I mean, to say that a team kind of didn't play its best, but they still won on the road, that's a sign that they're pretty good.
Well, I got to say it's a real interesting week ahead for BYU. I'll start backwards. Starting on Saturday, I'm sorry, for Gonzaga, I'll start backwards, though. Saturday, they are hosting BYU, which has been a dangerous game for them in recent years.
Yes.
Before that, even Thursday night, Lorenzo Romar, Mark Few, the rematch.
Together again.
These two had a bit of a problem with each other back when Romar was in Washington. Just a bit.
Where's Rocco? Somebody call him. I know he said he couldn't make it, but get him on the phone.
It'll be interesting to see them both coaching in the same game and see if there's any fireworks during this game on Thursday night.
I will say this. If there's an alley-oop at the end of that game, I don't think Mark Few will be angry.
Real quick over to the Atlantic 10, which we have Davidson and VCU tied for the top. Titel, let me start off with you. VCU picked up a couple of wins, including a nice 1-point road win at Dayton, which is not the easiest place to win at all.
Amazing run for VCU. They've won 12 of 14. They do have a pair of single-digit road losses at Davidson and Rhode Island. Another great defensive team, number 5 in the nation in adjusted defensive efficiency. You cannot make threes against this team either. 26.6% from behind the arc, number 1 in the nation, again, with 5 starters, 6'8" or less. They're all sophomores and juniors, so I think next year they might be a protected seed, assuming they all stick around.
But that game was pretty tricky, though, at Dayton, because VCU led by as many as 22 at one point.
Yeah, they did.
Flyers made a late comeback. Actually had a lead with about, I think, 20 seconds to go before VCU finally hit a shot to go ahead under 10 seconds.
Yeah, and David, this VCU team did win at Dayton. Now, the question for you is, if they do not win the Atlantic 10 tournament, will they be playing another game in Dayton?
I don't know. Like, when you pull up their profile, it depends. Like, all 6 of their remaining games, well, they're against A10 teams, so we don't even really need to pull it up, I guess. But they should be easily they should be favored to win all of those. They should easily win all of those. Rhodey, GW, SLU. I mean, these are just awful teams. They do go to Mason. Mason can be tricky at home, but if you're a tournament team, you win that game, and you really need to win that game without even sweating it. I know that there's no more meat left to be gotten. Basically, the hay is on the barn. It's as good as it's going to get because none of those wins are really going to elevate them. But
any loss will hurt them, though.
Any loss will hurt them. But if they win those 6, and I think that they will, is that enough? Or are they in, regardless of what happens in the conference tournament?
Titel?
I don't know that I can give you an official yes or no right now. I think that due to the weak field, as Chad has been mentioning 10 times because he's absolutely correct about it, I think that they might sneak in because, like, when your only Tier 1 win is Texas, I don't know if that's enough, but maybe.
The thing you got to look at is if they do slip up in any of these 6 games and they lose in the conference tournament, you're now adding 2 more bad losses to a resume that really can barely hold on to 1 more bad loss at this point.
Yeah, they are essentially walking on eggshells. And if they drop 2 more the rest of the way, whether it's during the regular season or 1 in the season and 1 in the conference tournament, then I don't think that will get them in. But I guess what I'm saying, I think they're good enough to win all those 6. I think they will win all 6 of those. And if they do, are they in? Because the conference tournament, once it gets past the quarters anyway, George Mason can play pretty good, Davidson pretty good, Dayton capable of playing okay. There's teams in this conference that are certainly capable of beating them. So you don't want to take it to the bank that they're going to win the conference tournament, but I do think that they win the next 6.
Right. They are tied with Davidson still for first place. VCU has a pair of home games that they must win this week against Brody and GW.
Yeah.
But I guess on that note, I'm going to pull this down, and I think we've reached the final thoughts stage of the program.
We talked about Buffalo earlier.
Yep. And so, Slika, let me start off with you on final thoughts.
I believe this was actually Joe Lunardi who confirmed this, but we do have the first in bid that was clinched, and that would be Wofford, who would clinch no worse than a tie in the SoCon. So while their aim is going to be for the NCAA tournament, they can do no worse than an NIT bid this year. So congratulations to the Terriers.
Yes, congratulations. But I think the NIT bid would be a major disappointment for them this year. Titel.
On a personal note, I want to give some final thought to Lute Olson. It was announced today that The former Wildcat coach is recovering from a stroke. The reason this is a major cause for concern, number one, he's 84 years old. Number two, his dad, Albert, died of a stroke at age 47. I don't know if it's genetic or not. I was trying to confirm if he got it because he had to watch his old team's terrible play over the past month. I could not confirm that, but it would not surprise me. So please send all your good vibes out west. I hope the Silver Fox gets back to full strength because he's going to be at the Final Four in April to present a Lute Olson Award to the best non-freshman in Division I.
Yeah, and all kidding aside, I did see on the bottom line that the prognosis is positive. He's expected to make a full recovery despite his age. And but, yeah, that is kind of a scare. Lute Olson, definitely one of the good guys.
Yeah. All right. David, any other final thoughts for you?
Yes, I would like to. I'm actually going to talk a little bit of Pac-12 here because we've been crapping on it. It's not as good as we're used to seeing it. No teams in the rankings. Really, the best team out there is Washington. They're on the fringe of, maybe not even being in the top half of the bracket. But you have to go back and you have to look at what they accomplished in the preseason, and I've pulled this up here. You can see the rankings. I don't think they get enough credit for this. Oregon ranked 14th, UCLA in the rankings, and then Washington 25th. So, they really did have a fantastic preseason, and I think that we've kind of forgotten that and are not giving them enough credit. Another thing that came out today, but that I saw today, Galen Clavio tweeted something out about the Pac-12 network and how the revenue sharing from that is not anywhere in the same universe as what some of the other power conference networks have, particularly the Big Ten. Now, it's paying out less than what the Big East is making, even from Fox. Now, that's not the only piece of their media deal. The Pac-12 is still getting more money overall, but just not a good showing. But still, the preseason, better than they thought. You have to congratulate them, and you have to congratulate the conference commissioner out there, and that is, of course, George Mason, Handy and Durahan.
Maybe that's what the conference needs, actually. But on that note, I do want to thank everybody for joining us. On behalf of David Griggs, John Salika, John Titel, I'm Chad Sherwood. This has been our Hoops HD Report. We'll be back with more podcasts later on the week. And we'll talk to you again real soon.